What up, guys? Welcome to episode 3 of Straight to the Kokoro. I'm extremely excited to have my brother, Elish Lee, strength coach, meditation teacher, all around personal development, mentor, and coach based out of New York City. Elish, thank you for joining me.
Good to see you, Trevor. Thank you for having me.
I'm super excited. Elish and I have a lot of super deep conversations, and I'd say similar views on what I can comprehend on life and just spirituality, which is what's, I don't know, one of those beautiful things that I think's portrayed really well in anime. So I know you're a big fan of Toriko, which I actually love the opening for and the show from what you've showed me. So I guess my first question is, like, when you think about what that time of your life was when you were like really into it, which if I recall correctly was during college, like how would you
Yeah.
describe that experience for that period of your life?
Man, you remember that better than I did. Man, what was that period of life like? It was crazy. Like I was living in this really disgusting fraternity house. It was just me and my pledge brothers. We were, cutting class and playing beer pong at 10 o'clock in the morning. And then occasionally when we get breaks to eat, we would sit down and watch Toriko. It was influenced by, my pledge brother, John Chow. I'll have to tag him now that he's mentioned in this. He was the one that introduced us to it. And it's not even like we watched it religiously. It was just, it was what we watched whenever we were together and like eating ramen or something like that in the middle of the day when we were otherwise supposed to be doing student stuff. Yeah, that part of my life was, if we dive deeper into it, it was pretty good, but it was a little hectic because I was like skating by through college, right? And at the same time feeling guilty and shameful about it. So I was like, didn't want to be in school, didn't want to be doing school stuff, and knowing that was, not taking care of those responsibilities was the wrong thing to be doing. And at the same time, making the choice to be defiant and, to do the bare minimum so I could do the most of whatever else it was that I felt compelled to do, which was usually just distract myself from stress, right? Whether it was lifting, whether it was drinking, sitting there with my pledge brother shooting the shit and smoking way too much hookah, like stuff like that. That's what my life was like. It has its unique challenges. I don't think I was particularly aware of the challenges I was facing. I was just in it. But yeah, with Toriko came, actually, I started really liking Toriko much later, when like after I graduated college. I think I was like sitting there in my apartment. I was like, and I think I was reminiscing on college maybe. And then Toriko came to mind. And then I remembered it was on Hulu. So I hopped on Hulu and just started watching, and it just became one of those shows that I would watch whenever I needed downtime. I'm not a big TV movie person, right? So I generally only watch TV whenever, with Ariana or something, or whenever I need to wind down and kind of numb out a little bit. But yeah, Toriko has been one of those shows that, it hooked me enough for me to find enjoyment in it. I thought it was extremely entertaining. I definitely have my thoughts and views about it, and it's a memorable show. But I wouldn't consider myself to be an anime person per se, being it that the only two exposures I've had to anime are, some movies, Toriko as a TV series, and I don't even know if anime people consider Avatar to be an anime, but
I think since they dubbed it in Japanese at one point, like there was a meme that's like, we'll accept this now.
That's hilarious.
Honestly, I mean, the ending is, I mean, the show itself, someone was actually talking to me about like Zuko has some of the best character development, like out of like Aang is kind of static, right? Like well, this is anime at this point. Like Aang's kind of static.
Zuko does have an incredible character development. I resonate very much with Zuko. Yeah, I could talk way more about Avatar than I could about Toriko.
I'll go for it, dude. So what, like, with Zuko's journey throughout the show, do you resonate with?
Well, Zuko starts out as someone who was severely wounded and deprived of his own self-respect and honor, right? When the Fire Lord Ozai, his father, basically slapped the living shit out of him with a flame and said, "You suck and get out, and you have to spend the rest of your life finding the avatar in order to earn my love," right? And I think a lot of people resonate with that to some degree, but especially Asian men, especially men in today's society in general. So Zuko starts out as this really determined, aggressive, angry, hurt person who can't focus on anything other than getting the very thing that he thinks he needs to be whole again. Right? So I resonate with that. You know, and I think a lot of first generation Americans, my parents were fresh off the boat from Vietnam as refugees in the Vietnam War. So I think, growing up as a very, relatively speaking, a very privileged youth to parents who knew nothing but war, kind of created this disconnect where, the expectations that my parents placed upon me were born from their own way of being that was adapted to extreme survival. They had no choice but to be extremely focused, to be willing to set everything about themselves aside for the betterment of the family. Right. So I guess growing up for me, though it instilled me what became discipline and tolerance, like I became a very good vessel for stress. I can handle a lot of stress, but it also left me feeling, separated from my parents and separated from society. Right. I spent the majority of my childhood and young adult life in a very affluent area of New Jersey. Right. So to grow up with parents that were very frugal, right? They were super big on doing the right thing and not wasting time. Like I had like an 8 or 9 p.m. curfew throughout my entire high school life.
Damn.
If I was allowed out, right? Like it was, if I was playing video games, if I was doing anything, if I was doing the things that I really wanted to do, which wasn't be in school or play an instrument, my parents would worry and they would look down upon that. They'd be like, okay, all time spent there is not time spent making yourself good in this world. So that's kind of how I relate to Zuko at the beginning. Right. You have anything to say about that? You have anything that you want to?
Yeah, what I resonate with that, like with the survival part, right? Like it's probably hard to, it's probably, I can't imagine with your parents exactly. Like I know for mine, both of them grew up like poorer, where they definitely had like multiple siblings, and it was like, stretch a dollar as far as you definitely could. And I was constantly reminded of that growing up too, is like, we did all this for you kids. And it was kind of like, I guess when I hear some of that, right? If you're not doing the things that make you like better, air quotes, like it's their way possibly of being like, these are the things that we think are going to provide security for you, that are going to make you successful through their eyes of what success is. Mm-hmm. And obviously like they're so focused on that, it's hard to put down like, these are the things we had to do to survive, right? Like my parents are still relatively cheap. Be like, why would you spend money on that? And be like, you can't take it with you, right? Like there's a healthy middle between that. But I definitely, and I even just think of like Zuko obviously has that physical scar in the show that is like, I guess maybe to some degree reflection of what you're saying too. Like he is scarred traumatically and also physically.
Yeah, totally. That event will sit with him forever, right? And that's just the physical representation of the deeper wound. Yeah, totally. Right. Like, it's funny that you say that because I think of all the ways in which I didn't grow up. I grew up in a different decade, in the sense that, in a different time period, in that the way that I relate to material items, to stress, to work, to success is very different from a lot of my peers who kind of grew up in families that were already well established in America, right? Like This is the funniest thing. And I used to make fun of my dad for all the time until I realized that I unconsciously became him. Like, I don't buy new clothes, right? If I, like, the newest thing I bought was a raincoat that was on sale when me and Ariana were on vacation in Wildwood because it was so rainy. I bought that only because I absolutely need to because it was too cold. And I had to sit there and I was like, man, do I get the $89 one or the $99 one? What are the difference in features? Am I going to use this more than 10 times in the next year? I could, but in my head, it was like, it's just cold. You sat in an ice bath for 28 minutes. You can cold plunge, right? Like, you got no problem. You lasted almost the entire winter without the heat on, right? Like, and then I was like, by the time I caught myself like putting it back and like wait, I'm not broke. What am I talking about? Things like that. And like my clothes, like my socks and my underwear and my t-shirts, I wear them until they have holes in them before I buy new ones, despite the fact that I am not financially needy in any sense. But it's testament to that pattern.
I feel like I sometimes think about it like that, but there are other times where I'll equate my time to like money. But it definitely depends on like the place I'm in mentally, because I'll be like, I don't want to spend $20 on like, it might be something more essential like socks. It's like, I don't want to spend $20 on socks. It's like that's like 2 times eating out. And like, and I just start proportionately doing it. But I definitely feel that. I mean, my dad is also the type of person that never throws anything out. So like if you need the spark plug to like make maybe like a 1969 Volkswagen, like it's probably in my garage. But like, but he also has the irony of anytime he'll get rid of it, it's like the one time he'll need it like a week later. I'll be like, fuck.
That, yeah, there's trauma related to that, right? There's got to be. That's a funny pattern that happens to me too. Right? We send something and like something pulls us back from wanting to do it, and we do it anyway. We go against our gut feeling, and then the universe is just like, ha ha, you should have listened.
Well, you know what's interesting with that, with like, I don't know how sentimental your parents are, but like mine are, my mom is very sentimental, and I would say I'm the middle between both my parents. But there are certain things like that are material in nature that I'm just like, this thing matters to me because of obviously the association with it, the person who gave it to me. It's not even the thing itself. It's not the thing itself, but it's like, there are certain things that I'm like, I guess I have no problem like cleaning house. And then I'll get to like an item where I'm like, I don't think I can let this go. Like,
Yeah, it depends for me. Like, so I guess if you saw me typing, it's because I'm looking up the textbook definition of sentimental.
okay.
Which is of or prompted by feelings of tenderness, sadness, or nostalgia. Dealing with feelings of tenderness, sadness, or nostalgia, typically in an exaggerated and self-indulgent way. Excessively prone to feelings of tenderness, sadness, or nostalgia. So, how sentimental are my parents? See, that's tricky, right? I'm about to, get deep with this one because I think my dad is more sentimental than my mom, but only because his experience back in Vietnam, his childhood experiences weren't in the more gross ways as bad as my mom's. So this actually reminds me of a question that I asked my parents when I was diving into trying to understand more about their past, the way of trying to understand myself, my current patterns. And I asked my mom and dad, do you guys ever miss Vietnam? Right. My dad came over on the day the war ended, so 1970. Well, my dad left Vietnam in 1975, April 30th, 1975. My mom came over, I think, in 83, much later. But I asked them, do you miss Vietnam? Do you ever get sad thinking about it? And my dad, you can tell, my dad was just like, he kind of turned his head down. My dad doesn't express much emotion, right? He just goes, yeah, just like that. It made me want to cry. I was like, oh, in that moment, I just saw everything. I just saw why my dad works as hard as he does, why my dad fights so hard to keep the family together, why my dad keeps everything inside, and why my dad fantasizes about going back home. My dad has this fantasy of buying a farm in Vietnam and spending the rest of his days there after he retires, occasionally coming back and traveling the world. But he really wants to go back home because he was ripped away by the war. And I asked my mom the same question, and she goes, nope. She's like, not even a little bit. I have a good life here. I didn't have a life back then. I paraphrased it, but that's basically what she said.
No, yeah. I mean, I could definitely, I know you've joked with me one time, if your dad won the lottery, I think he would have that. Like, he would have all the money and then like either the rice farm or something. He would have some kind of farm, I believe is what you told me. But I guess I know what you mean when it's like there's like someone answers your question and you can tell like, yeah, like there's so much more underneath that answer. Like because I know that exact thing you're talking about with like, my dad's gotten more expressive, which I've been really impressed with. But like there's a lot of times where it's just like, no, everything's, when people say things are fine, like, and that's obviously not the best example of what you're talking about because of what your dad went through, right? But like you could read that there's so much more there, and that's not the reality of like, yeah, like there could be a sadness to it, right? Like there could be like a reservedness to wanting to go there.
Mm-hmm.
So I definitely get that. And I can understand too with like, your mom's situation of like, nope, like never going back. Like, especially, yeah.
So I think because of that, right, I think my dad has a greater tendency towards sentimentality, and my mom, at least not consciously. I think she's unconsciously more I guess I'm subbing out sentimental for a different concept, but yeah, man.
Well, I think it can apply too in the sense of like if you or your sister gave your parents anything, like how easy, like if they were cleaning up their house, right? Like how easy would it be for them to get rid of that thing? Or like, you know what I mean? Like,
I think it would be pretty hard. Like if it's like it depends. It depends on the thing's function.
Okay.
Right? Like my parents have had the same washing machine and dryer for no shit, like maybe almost 15 years. Right. Okay. That thing is like, it's the paint's peeling off, it's rusted, like it's dirty and everything. It still works, right? So I told my parents, I was like, guys, you need a new washer. Like your clothes are definitely covered in rust. You're making yourself susceptible to getting sick, and this thing smells like it's not rancid, but it's clearly beyond its years. And then my dad's very hesitant to buy new things, right? So that's what I mean. But my dad's a lot more sentimental than my mom. My dad will be like, "Oh, how much more can we squeeze out of it?" But not unreasonably. If you can present my dad a good enough reason, he'll let it go, right?
Yeah.
But like if they're getting rid of stuff in the house, if it's genuinely not needed, it's gone. But if it has a function, like if it's doing something for the house, it's like, my dad will be a lot more reluctant to replace it unless it absolutely needs to be, or to remove it unless it absolutely needs to be.
Will your dad also try and fix things himself before he like gets rid of it? Like if something breaks?
I don't know.
Because
I think my dad enjoys doing that, so he'll look for the opportunity, but I don't think my dad is so stubborn about it that he'll be like, I'm gonna figure this out.
I don't think, yeah, I feel like I know for my dad being a mechanic, like, and having his job, part of it's like his enjoyment, because he's expressed that, like, there's the fun of problem solving through that, and like the tinkering of like, this thing didn't work, now it works. But there's also the like, am I about to spend $300 on a new snowblower, or am I gonna like possibly throw $90 at it and then like it's gonna be good for another 5 years or whatever, right? Like,
yeah.
I would say that's like what I'm very familiar with. Like if it ain't broke, like don't get rid of it. I'll change.
That makes sense, right? If your dad's a mechanic, if he's a handyman, if he knows how to fix things in that kind of way. My dad's a network engineer, right? So my dad can fix security systems and internet type stuff. And my dad's a pretty good handyman around the house too. I think he actually recently just renovated and replaced the sinks in his master bedroom, in his master bathroom.
I remember.
So, oh yeah, you were there. You heard it, right? You heard it. My dad would go up there and work on it and stuff like that.
I remember seeing that, like, that's the biggest bathtub I've ever seen in my life. And like, I just remember like part of the bathroom was apart as we were sitting in the sauna.
Yeah, yeah,
You're like, holy shit, he put the sauna in the bedroom.
yeah. My dad
Awesome.
literally was just like, I want a sauna, and he just put it in his bedroom, like just right there in front of the bed. So funny.
I love that though. Do they have a TV in their bedroom or no? I don't remember if I
Yeah.
recall. Okay, I'm just thinking of like that's where the TV would be. Instead, you wake up and you're just like sauna.
Yeah, my dad puts the TV right in front of the bed, and behind the TV is the sauna.
Okay,
I think my dad's recently removed the TV from the bed because he's been having like sleep issues and stuff like that. So,
gotcha. Okay, yeah, it sounds like your parents are like able to actually clear out stuff where my dad could do like the whole house could be like, nope, we don't need any of this. The house itself just needs to be here. And my
seems
mom
like
would
it.
be like, we can't get rid of like the plastic spoons, like not the plastic spoons.
Oh yeah, my parents aren't like that. No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to
Yeah.
think. I feel like that's really
I guess if we tie it back to what we were talking about, tying it back to Zuko, right?
yeah.
Yeah. So those are the. So I guess that's I guess to bring it back for the sake of keeping the thread alive, right? Like I guess those circumstances for me created my equivalent to Zuko and his dad, right? And then there's the internal battle that he faces as he goes through, right? There is recently, I went through these really big health issues, right, that largely incapacitated me. And something that reminded me of that, that it was Sacred Sons, it was Convergence, and then a month later, it was Rohatsu Daisashin, right, where I had that huge awakening experience that changed my life permanently. And then right after that, from mid-December until now, just physical health issues out the wazoo. Right? As I was going through it and I made the connection, Convergence was a big thing for me. Right? I had that massive breakthrough, massive release. Then Sashin Retreat, that was the most massive release ever of everything. And then there's now a whole different version of me in competition with my old patterns, like a different insight, a different way of seeing now in dancing with, more like clashing with my old patterns. So while I was going through all that sickness, all I could remember was when Zuko had chosen, I think he had, because I think they had captured Appa. Appa was captured, right, and brought to Ba Sing Se, I think. And then Zuko goes in and finds Appa, and instead of, I don't know, whatever, I think he releases him.
Yeah.
Right. I think that's what it was. You know what I'm talking about, right?
No. Because
Iroh had like basically told him like, you have to make a choice right now. In some sense, it was like, you got to make a really important choice, and don't be a dumbass.
So no, because I remember, and this is like for anyone that like watched far enough in it, but like when he's like, "Hey Zuko," here, he's like rehearsing how to introduce himself later on as he's
Before that, yeah.
But he says at one point, he's like, "I let your whatever, whatever Appa is going Ba Sing Se," which I think is where they meet Toph, or was that before that?
No, they met Toph.
Okay.
But like that. Do you remember what? So after that, that was a major moment of conflict for him. Something drastically shifted. He went against the momentum of his patterns and his pain, and chose what was ultimately right instead. He chose the fate of the world effectively over himself, his own honor.
So,
and then he got sick, right? You remember he got really sick. He started to have a fever, and he was like incapacitated. He was totally wrecked, and Iroh was taking care of him. And then Zuko's like, "What's going on?" And then Iroh was telling him that there is a battle of energies within him, and that he needs to sleep and rest. And he was having these emotional releases, and then when he woke up out of it, he was like a totally different person. That's when he sought to join the team.
So
at 19.
So I have a couple of things off of that, and I guess like what I would think of that I resonate most with is like when we were getting to spend a lot of time together during like quarantine at one point, and I was going through, I think it was when I was going through the one like dark night or it was in combination with like the different plant medicines and like the dark night. And I just remember, I guess like that's the one insight period ended with like my cycles of like meditation always seem to end. They start with one very particular theme dream and they end with one very particular dream. And like I wake up the next day knowing typically like when that happens, like it's over. Like, and I just,
Whoa, that's so cool, man.
yeah, it's kind of weird, but I remember like I had talked to you about this too, and it was I had finished. I think it was one of the worst periods of my life ever. Like, because I had called you multiple times and you were there for me throughout it, and my therapist, and like I literally just remember like I was like, holy shit, like I'm losing my mind, and I just surrendered that like night as I was having insomnia, and like when I let go, like I just remember this relief that was like I kind of watched everything. I kind of like watched my life flash before my eyes, not like I was gonna die, but just kind of like a recap up until this moment of the story.
It's definitely a death. It's definitely a death experience, right? It's not maybe
And
not a physical death, but a physical death is not more death than the spiritual one.
And I just remember waking up the next day and like my eyesight was different. And I remember messaging you, like I couldn't figure out what it was. Like
I remember this.
my peripheries were different and something was irking me. Like it was just this awareness of more space, I think, in my visual field. But it was when I had that like insight that like at the bottom, we're all like, we all have the same needs, right? Like we're not different. And I think like that is the guiding insight I keep coming back to, where it's like, how do I want to direct my life? Like that, it was the most clarity I feel like I've had.
Clarity on the insight into our common humanity, our
Yeah, I think like human,
interconnectedness.
yeah, like from my perspective, like human nature isn't inherently bad. It's things have happened to us that distort the way we're acting in the world. But like baseline, people aren't bad people.
Right.
And we all have like those same needs of wanting to be loved, heard, and seen, and not the superficial idea of being seen or heard either. Like, so if someone heard
Yeah.
those words, you know what I mean? There's a difference between, I know, you know, like there's the experience of it, and then there's like what someone could say, like I
So
see.
what you're hearing, right?
Yeah,
And what
yeah,
you're not
yes,
seeing a physical body and hearing physical words, physical sounds.
for sure. I feel like what could be really cool for people to hear. Oh, I guess to finish that real fast, actually. So like, there's a character I most align with, and I plan on getting a tattoo of at one point. His name's Bam or Bob. I forget how you pronounce, but he doesn't know himself. I feel like throughout this whole story, and it's still going because the guy's still illustrating it, like he's coming to know himself and not basically take on other people's like power, so to speak, like, or other people's things. Like he doesn't want to be some like these other things because he knows they aren't him, but he's not really sure who he is. He doesn't have any memory of like who he was growing up. He doesn't know either of his parents. But I just remember like really aligning with, because I was reading this as I was going through that period too. And it's still something I like currently read. And it's like, it's so empowering, I think, to see like the story development and the character development. But what I was thinking would be kind of cool if you want to go into it is kind of like, as we're changing our patterns, right? Like right isn't always going to feel good. And I know you just said, right, there's the inner clashing of like your old patterns with your new patterns. And if you wanted to kind of talk about what your process looks like, because I know we've had that discussion. And I feel like that's one of the hardest things in my experience, is like the right thing that moves me more into alignment might not feel good, which is what I want. Like I want that, you know, self pat on the back, like you're making the right decision, when it's like, okay, well, this might not feel very good, but it's the right thing.
Yeah, well, it's true, right? Like it brings up a lot of things. One is what is right and what is wrong, right? What is right as a concept, what is wrong as a concept. And ultimately, it's so relative, right? And when we're healing and when we're changing, we're face to face with the relative nature of right. Because it's the right that feels good, or that we are already habituated to, that the groove has already been greased enough times, there's the right that is also the path of least resistance. And then there is the right that is based on a point of view driven by some kind of an insight or something that is other than our habitual way of being.
Yeah. And I think it's more of the, I guess to clarify, it's more of the insight way that I think is like for me, and I'll stick to me because obviously it's you and I on this call, right? Like if I wanted to have better emotional intelligence in the way that I interact with other people in the world from a more compassionate standpoint, and maybe more empathy is the right phrasing for this situation, right? Maybe that wasn't what was modeled for me, or the things that were exactly shown, right? So when it comes to making the decision of, hey, I'm going to do this thing, but it's not what part of me wants to do, because part of me wants to just get its way or his way. Like, but the right thing that moves me more into alignment with that insight or the way in which I want to exist in the world is this other decision. But it's not going to feel good. Does that help at all?
Well, I mean, I'm yeah, I was building up with that, right? That's basically what I was describing, why it's so difficult, why I believe it is based upon my own experience, why that phenomena happens, because it is real. I don't think there's a person in this world that's never experienced that, right? Because that's what it is, right? You know, we're not one person, right? One point of view, one fixed entity or fixed structure or ego structure trying to do many different things. We're actually shape-shifting as people, right? Because what makes a person is not simply the experience of experiencing, or the sense that I am this intact, static, solid being from behind these eyes looking out into the world. What makes a person is, in some sense, the way that they relate to reality, the way they relate to experience, the way they relate to the world around and within themselves. So as we go through these changes as people, we change as people because our beliefs, our needs, our awareness of those needs, and our capacity to fulfill them changes. Right? So there's that clash, right? It's like in that moment, we are at least two different people happening at once, competing for the same action. Right. So it's like, okay, I can either do this and satisfy these needs that I believe to be important, yet they're important mostly out of habit, because of the habit, rather than because we've consciously decided this is what's best. Right. And then there's the other part of us that views our needs slightly differently and recognizes, like, if I do that, I'm going to suffer more in this way. And I want to suffer less and live that way. But at the same time, it's both sides of us wanting the same thing, believing that if I make the right choice over here, that's going to make me suffer. But if I take the path of least resistance, I'm going to suffer less. In some sense, that's true. And then there's the opposite, right? The moving into alignment with our most authentic needs requires us at some point to be able to say, if I go the path of least resistance, I go back to the old way. I reconstruct the old world.
Yeah, and I think about it just as like the immediate gratification versus like delayed gratification to some degree, right? Like, are you willing to feel good now versus, down the road you're still in that same place, like you're saying, or are you willing to deal with some discomfort in this moment to know you're moving closer into alignment with what you want? And I feel like you give me your thoughts on how that it's kind of like a trust fall at times. Like, you have to know you have to trust that the decision you're making, which moves you more in alignment with the version of yourself you want to be, is the right decision, even though, it's conflicted.
Yeah, absolutely. It is a big trust fall. And it's maybe even it's what it is you have to be willing to be totally vulnerable again. You have to be like, when we try to make new decisions and behave in new ways, right? Or try to recreate ourselves in some sense. We don't actually know that's going to work, right? We have to become totally vulnerable to the possibility that doing that thing is going to bring about the most awful thing in exchange for simultaneously opportunity for the better thing, the best thing, right? And that's something that that's very interesting to me, right? Like it's a state we have to be totally vulnerable, because if we think about the brain and the mind as anticipatory organs, right? They are anticipatory in nature. They are designed to take in our sensory perceptions and make sense of it in such a way that we can predict what's going to happen next for obvious survival reasons. And the only way we can anticipate what's going next is if we reference the past, right? So in the moment when we're faced with a choice, right? Let's say I'm smoking, I have a cigarette in my hand and I have to make a decision to smoke it or not smoke it. If obviously this implies that I'm a smoker. Let's say I'm a smoker.
Yeah.
By habit, reality and experience has shown me that if I light this up and I smoke, it will have some kind of a desirable, albeit a desirable by way of delusion, a desirable effect on how I'm feeling, right? And in some sense, if we think about it in terms of probabilities, not that we are completely clueless that not smoking this might actually lead to make things better, but let's make it simple. We have to try to make the choice to do the thing that we have no clue is actually going to help. Not by direct experience. We may have logical or intellectual justifications. We have maybe been to dare class enough times and watched the news enough times to be able to know that if I smoke this, I'm going to get sick. I'm going to suffer more. But I don't know that yet because I haven't quit. And if I have quit before, I don't know it well enough to be sure that it's worth it. So we have to be totally vulnerable to making a choice that can lead to utter failure.
It's a big risk, yeah.
Right. I think about Jordan Peterson and that when he says that maybe God didn't create evil in the universe. Like maybe God created a universe in which there is the possibility of evil, because the universe in which there is the possibility for evil is better than the universe without it. And because there is the possibility for evil, it will happen. It will happen at some point, somewhere.
Yeah,
we have to be willing to let that happen. We have to be vulnerable. Like that's what vulnerability is, in some sense, is being in a state where you are totally susceptible to all the forces of the universe.
Yeah. I just think of safety, obviously, which goes in line with that vulnerability. And even I haven't gone into a ton of it, but some of the polyvagal stuff talking about the evolutionary aspects of that prediction model, right? We don't want to be in an unsafe situation because that means survival might not happen. I might not live. And that's obviously at a very baseline.
Well, we don't want to be in a situation of low safety without either a good reason or the resources to justify it, to make that.
Yeah.
We don't want to be caught helpless and powerless and also not safe.
It makes me think of a lot of things, especially the need for models, right? People have done the thing we're trying to do, ways you've assisted me in my life. And then other people have kind of been that guiding light, so to speak, in some ways where it's okay, I wasn't shown how to do this. I want to do this, but at least I have some reference for someone who has done it.
Mm-hmm.
And then in addition to that, the whole, actually having this conversation the other day, simple doesn't mean easy, right? And the conditions aspects of where are you when you're trying to smoke that cigarette, and how it might not be as easy in one setting and situation as it is in another setting. I think people don't take that into account enough. Even from a compassion standpoint, right? There's reasons it's easier for me not to spend money on whatever the hell I randomly buy on Amazon, if I'm in a certain headspace versus a different headspace.
Yeah. Yeah. I had something to say and then I just lost it. Totally just lost it.
Was there any other thoughts you had in line with kind of what we were just talking about? I besides the one I know you just lost.
Yeah. Well, we were talking about when the right thing doesn't feel good.
Yeah.
Right. There's so many things to be said about it. Right. And we were talking about vulnerability and all that stuff. Yeah, I mean, we have to come to expect it. Right? I think that's one thing that a lot of people have to recognize, is that we have to come to expect that we're going to, if we want to make our lives better, we have to be able to expect and recognize when we're at that fork in the road. Because I think what gets people in trouble is that they end up there, but they don't know what to do about it. They don't really know where they're at. They don't recognize that the choice in front of them is for one reality or for another. You know, when we're in that state of survival, or in that state of otherwise non-safety, or in the state of disease and suffering, we are compelled by our unconscious mechanisms to, our reality is skewed towards the thing that's familiar, right? So that thing really does feel right in the moment. Smoking that cigarette does feel really right in that moment, right? So we have to recognize that though it's simple, right? Like you're saying, it's simple but not easy. We have to be able to recognize the gravity of it, so that we can recognize, see beyond the simple, and actually see the complexity of it, right? Like simple behind simple is complex, right? Is be able to see that, so that we're more aware of the consequences.
And I'm sorry, were you gonna add it? Was that the end of that thought? I think that's where like involvement in the decision-making process like comes into play, right? Like I know personally, like I'll use the example of ice cream, right? Like if I eat a bunch of ice cream before I go to sleep, like it's gonna taste good, right? But like what are the then side effects on my digestion like the next day? Like how does that permeate into my sleep? Like can I make a decision branching out all the possible consequences or benefits of doing that thing? And I think then even if I fuck up, like it's easier to then be like, okay, are we really about to do this again, knowing that like ice cream before bed in large amounts leads to indigestion? Like,
Mm-hmm.
you know what I mean? And then is that discomfort worth it? Like, and I think that makes it easier to make a different decision too, because at least you have a direct path understanding like what happens versus just kind of throwing darts with a blindfold.
Yeah, like people, like we need to know that when we approach that decision, when we approach that situation, we're going to be compelled to see small, and what we need is to see big. We need to step back and zoom out so that we can see it's like, okay, you know, Rain Man, this whole situation, just be like, okay, if I do all this, right, then ultimately if I choose this, you know, I might feel better temporarily, but then I'll get all of this that I didn't see before. And then if I make the choice to not eat the ice cream, I'm going to be sad, right? I'm going to be upset. I may be left with whatever distress I was trying to curb, but ultimately it leads to something much better. And then you see that and you're like, okay, see small or see big. When you zoom in, it's either pleasantness or unpleasantness, but when you zoom out, it's pleasantness and then future unpleasantness. And here it's unpleasantness and then future pleasantness. And then you're like, oh, okay, cool. And back to what I realize now what you were talking about models, right? The importance of having models, right? That's why everyone says, you know, you are the average of the 5 people around you. Whoever was that? Jim Rohrer or something like that, right? John.
I know the exact thing you're talking about. Like you're pick your circle carefully.
Yeah, some really important person in the business world, but right, like we need models. Well, it is more likely that we are going to make better decisions if we spend more time with people who are already more, or at least that are as accustomed to making the right choices or better at making the right choices for ourselves, right? With more awareness, with more conscientiousness and intention. Like the more models we have, the more possible it is. Without the models, I want to say it's possible, but not really. It's not really possible until something changes the way your model the way you model your reality.
Like a threshold moment, right? Like we were talking about the other day off.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. A threshold moment, anything that disrupts your normal way of seeing things.
Yeah. I guess.
Yeah, like, yeah.
No, go ahead, please. I just lost part of what I was thinking earlier.
No, those things are really important. And actually, now I'm jumping back to Avatar, right? Like models, right? Zuko leaves his previous sets of models. He's influenced by Iroh, but Iroh is still part of his old life, right? So he needs to distance himself from it for a little bit. He leaves Iroh and then goes to find Aang, new models, new ways of interfacing with the world that is of less anger, less suffering, more compassion, more understanding, right? And if Zuko didn't have that option, if they didn't take Zuko in, he would not become the Zuko that he is. Like that's literally because of that.
So as someone who's like far more familiar with the show, like I've seen it, do you think Zuko at that point he knew what he was trying to move towards? Like, because he made the decision earlier with like Ba Sing Se, and then like, did you think he saw Aang as like, okay, I could either keep going the route of chasing the Avatar, trying to win back my father, or I could move in a direction of, I guess, being less alone to some degree, I would say. But I mean, he had Iroh, like you said, and Iroh was a really good model and a really good character. But like Aang represents, I guess, something different.
Well, at that point, I think there was a very powerful shift in what he believed to be his role in this whole situation. Big shift in the direction his life was pointed. Whether or not he consciously knew that is probably a question. But there was a part of him that did shift, right, when he made the decision to let Appa free, right, before he went through all that stuff, right? I think that was his awakening in some sense. So I don't think at that point there was any other choice for him. I just don't know if he was really fully aware that I don't think he was consciously like, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do the best I can because I have to. This is why. I think there's a part of him that knew and he was like, okay, this seems right. There's an intuition here. But he was, he still struggled through the whole situation. Like he still struggled a lot with competing with his old views and judgments and behaviors. Right. So, and it didn't seem to show really early at that point that he was well practiced in this new way of being. Yeah. So yes and no, right? Yes, that there's no way he could have not ended up there. And at the same time, I don't think he really clearly knew what he was aiming towards.
He was just doing what felt right.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think. I know like that obviously touches on like some of the rehearsing with the introduction, and then there's the whole like trust issues thing as he's like
Zuko here.
Yeah. I think that will be burned into my mind forever too, just because of also the setting of that whole city being like upside down.
Yeah. I resonated so deeply with that version of Zuko. That you're trying to be someone different because if you are the same way that you were, you're gonna be, it's not gonna be good. You come in and just be like, hi.
I feel like it's like,
I don't know what else to say. Like, stop.
I mean, what comes to my mind is like the awkwardness and discomfort of like he's trying to bring himself into the world. At least that's how, from my perspective, I see it, right? Like, and it's uncomfortable. Like it's like, oh yeah, having to do all these new things. And I feel like what's interesting, in my opinion, with like the vulnerability stuff that we've done through like men's work, plant medicine, like just coming to know ourselves better, right? Like it's still challenging, at least for me. It's still like, because I'm not going to speak for you when I say this, like it's still really.
Oh, you can speak for me. It's definitely challenging.
I know you. I know you felt the same way, but I didn't want to just like put words in your mouth. But like, it's still incredibly challenging. But like, we know the trajectory of where we're trying to go. But in my experience, like, it's this weird thing that like once you get a taste for like being met where you are and being able to have those vulnerable experiences, like there's almost a call to do it more. knowing that there's going to be discomfort, but knowing it all leads to that better version of ourselves through doing
Well, it brings us, it becomes our way of getting back to that moment of simultaneous vulnerability and acceptance, right? A moment of pure connection. Because that's what that symbolizes to me, right? Is a state of pure acceptance. You are perfectly vulnerable. You are bearing your heart out to the world, and the world accepts you. That moment is, lightning, right? It's not conceptual. It's not like, oh yeah, this just feels good because I recognize that I'm vulnerable and they're vulnerable, and we see each other and we're like, oh yeah, that's great, fantastic. That's not why it feels good. It feels good because your heart is cracked open and allowed to be left open and embraced. And that feeling is man, it is all the thing. I'm struggling to put words to it because it's so magnificent. It is a feeling, an experience that is so pure that deep inside that there's nothing better than that. Right? That's why those experiences all of a sudden can shift people. Like when we work with psychedelics or when people do men's work, they have really potent releases, and the first time they have that experience, that's when that, oh man, that experience delivers to you some kind of absolute certainty that there's a different way to live your life.
I think it's just, it's that feeling of full acceptance. Like you don't have to be anyone in the sense of like you fit this character mold of this avatar, right? Like just come as you are, and who you are. And I think that's for me, that was such a novel experience in the experiences I've had of it, right? But to what you're saying, it's so raw and authentic. It's like this, in my experience, like this is the way, right? Like that's what is right, like or feels right for me. And I know you feel the same way too. I think that's the only way I can think about it, is there's no mask to put on. There's no emotions you shouldn't have, like things you can't experience. It's just there
are no boundaries.
Yeah.
Right? In that moment, all the boundaries fall away. And because all the boundaries fall away, you are your fullest self, which means the mask falls off and everyone else's mask falls off. And all that's left is blinding light and this electrifying energy that is simply the energy of the universe itself, of life itself, of connection, of love. What people call love as the fabric of the universe. It's what happens when everything falls away.
And I think like off of that, one of the biggest kick in the asses is like that feeling of being disconnected because we think we're the only ones dealing with our issues, right? And then you're in one of these environments or even a one-on-one with someone else and they open up about that kind of stuff, and then like it lightens the load, but you realize it's not just me. Like, and I think that's like it's such a potent thing, like that that connection, as you're just like gesturing that, like it's changed my perspective of how I even think about like other people, right? We all have our problems, but like there are a lot of the same things just repackaged in different boxes. The core content's still the same thing.
Yeah.
Like it's just being presented in that way. And I think it's so much easier to have empathy for people in that way.
Well, it's not just easier, it's natural, right? Because what becomes more clear than anything else is that we are all equal, that we are all one, right? So empathy is just empathy and compassion is a natural expression of being able to witness someone as an extension of yourself and yourself as an extension of them, right? That's just like birds chirp and the sun shines. The conditions for that are, authentic expression from there is that of empathy and compassion, right? You can't help it, right? And that's why it's so significant. You don't have to try to be empathetic in that state. Empathy is just natural to you because you see very clearly You are cracked open. You are not otherwise preoccupied with rearranging the way your life is or who you are or who they are in your own mind. It's just, I see you.
Yeah. No, I resonate strongly with the clarity part. Like when what is my worldview when I have clarity, or like of moment to moment stuff, right? Like it's a lot more natural. It is more natural to have those expressions like you're saying, where there's not that aversion, I guess, in some of the same ways, or the cloudiness of thinking like maybe someone's projecting onto me or some situation's really uncomfortable, right? Like it's not as extreme as it appears, and there's more here to unpack rather than just like reacting to the superficial aspect of what's happening and the person.
Yeah. I resonate with that. Whew, man, this is a good topic. This topic is like lighting my mind on fire. Like, I'm having trouble keeping to like my mind's just like spewing out thoughts.
I just haven't. Yeah, I'm like, no. I'm like, just come back to this. Like whatever I need to answer with will be there.
Yeah, and I think that's a good signal as to really how important this is. It's really important to me. Like that connection, that authenticity, that way of relating to others in the world. That is the only thing that's important to me. Right? Like everything pales in comparison to that, or everything is a way of being able to support that. Right? And you know, and so I think it's just the most magnificent and the most right thing to be thinking about when it comes to cultivating a deep internal well-being, right? sense of self-knowing and things like that.
I also think of like just that sense of connection, because what always rings true for me is like I've been in conditions where I've had very little but felt incredibly connected to the people I've been spending time with, and like I didn't need all the other things that I feel like I need at times. Like maybe I could have only had one pair of pants and I would have been totally fine. I'm not suggesting anyone do that, but you know what I mean? Like that's like, I remember even with the first mindfulness, I'm like, what I'm talking about it's exactly is like Ben House's first mindfulness retreat. Like I knew no one. I never even met Ben, who was facilitating. And like by the fourth day, like I was in the airport, like, fuck, I have to go home. And it was like, we didn't have a TV. We played Uno every night, which is an easy way to lose friends, I say. Like
you played what every night?
Uno. Like
Uno, nice.
Like you get down to one card and then someone just screws you with a draw four. Like
draw four or those swap hands.
I just remember like I don't think I won a single game, but like in those moments, right? Like there was definitely a lot of vulnerability and authenticity, especially in the gratitude circle that closed it out. And like I just remember I was like, fuck, like this is it. Like that connection, like you're saying, like that, yeah, that connection is so important. And being able to
everything, dude. There's like nothing outside of it. Like anyone who thinks that anything else is more important is, in my mind, so disconnected from the most beautiful and meaningful aspects of life, right? Because society has shown us that you can have everything else and not have that connection, and you are miserable, right? You can have all the material and so material status and material things. You can have all the power, all the social status, and you're still a miserable human being, right? So, but if you have all those things and you have that deep connection, guess what? Not only are you fulfilled, happy, a pleasant person to be around, you're doing good for the world.
I feel like there's also just so much more of the sharing of those things, like of the material resources and the willingness to give. Yeah, no, to agree 100%.
Yeah.
Because it's like how much do I care about like money and other stuff, or going out of my way for someone when I have a lot of clarity? I'm happy with the way that my life is. And that doesn't imply everything is perfect, right? Like it just implies that like things are good. And I think that's a whole nother like animal discussion, obviously, but it's like, hey, and not everything has to be perfect, but I guess my needs met maybe would resonate most with like what we've talked about before.
Yeah, absolutely.
I actually, I always find I found this funny the other day. I was talking to someone and I was asking, they were talking about this guy who does a lot of stuff on wellness, but it's mainly like diet and other physiological stuff. And I was
Mhm.
like, does he address the aspect of like social community? And she's like, not really. Like, I think this book came out in the like 1990 something or 1970 something. And I was like, it's funny because like I think people are like, these things have just become prominent. Where in my mind, like we used to have, especially with Sacred Sons, this is what I think of, is like we used to have a more tribal society, right? Where we would like heal together, support each other. And we essentially lost it. So it's not that we found this new thing. We're just coming back to what was.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, and it makes it make more sense, like, when we think about it that way. That it's a remembering and a returning rather than building something from scratch.
And I think that's why that like those vulnerable moments also ring so strongly, right? Is like you have the connection, you have the support, like, and for me, it was this feeling of like I could come out of my shell and not, I didn't feel rejected. It wasn't like someone, no one verbally, it wasn't the oral rejection, but there was no rejection period in Sacred Sons in that space. But like you could obviously see like if someone's like, you know, giving you like the evil eye, or like there's this hesitation to actually be able to see you and accept you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there was none of that, which I thought was incredibly beautiful.
Yeah, like that experience is so potent. It's really life changing. It was life changing for both of us,
For sure.
right? And you know, coming into alignment with that is the key to building a really fulfilling life. However, it is that you express that in the world is, you know, is besides the point. But if we want to become really happy, we need to come to recognize that most fundamental truth, right? Or the most fundamental truth, depending which level you're talking about.
Yeah.
I know, are we talking enlightenment here, or we're talking more in the relative world, but not separate from each other.
Yeah.
Like if people, if the people who felt, if the people who felt as if they changed their lives for the better in a drastic way were able to look back in their lives and come to recognize that it's because that what began it was an initial experience of unity, right? Acceptance of vulnerability, and then now seeking the conditions for that to become normal. If the people who are suffering could come to recognize that that's what they're missing. They're not missing money. They're not missing those things. Obviously, sensitive topic. If your most basic needs are not being met, then that's the only thing that you can worry about. But let's assume, you know, let's assume we're talking about the people who have their most fundamental basic needs met. If they come to recognize the reason why they're unhappy is because they're disconnected from themselves, from the world, haven't yet had a unifying experience that showed them that there is this world beyond the veil that is brilliant and perfect as it is. And seeing that makes it easier for us to now make choices and move forward in the world. If we could see that that is the most important thing, oh my goodness, we would live in a much better world. We would live in a much more harmonious world without sacrificing the diversity.
And I'm happy you mentioned like the other environmental aspects of like, obviously, yeah, we all like, I mean, assuming depending on what your life is like we need enough money to have some sense of safety, right? Like we need those other things. But I think that's also where finding your tribe, I'll say, or your people, right, is so important. So you have that support to be able to keep going. Um,
Yeah.
I think it was you that yeah, it was you put it at the end of one of your posts where it was like, if you want to go far, if you want to go fast, like go alone. If you want to go far, go together, right? Like,
Yeah.
I know for me, like without the people in my life, you being one of those incredibly important people, like I wouldn't be able to have made the decisions I've made that have led to me being like who I am right now and being able to live my life the way I live right now. And I think that's like, if you have one person that can at least help reinforce those things, because I think that's what's so hard about like initial change too, right? Is like if you're the first of your generation or family doing that thing, like all you probably have is fucking opposition. Like,
You got no models, right?
yeah,
You're
yeah.
already immersed in the world where that model doesn't exist, right?
Yeah, I mean, and also I just think about like therapy and mental health, right? Like there's this whole stigma still that is changing with like people are weak, but if you're the first person to attempt to go to therapy and you have no one else, like you either need a threshold moment, like you said, which could be part of it, but you might not even then make the decision then. Like it might just make the consideration of doing that higher. But like, what would it be like to have someone tell you, like, "Hey, I did the same thing. You're going in the right direction." A lot easier, and at least you know you have someone's hand on your back.
Right. Yeah. Now the unknown starts to become a little bit, more illuminated. Right. Then that stuff is so important. That's why it's so important to be able to share our experiences and to connect deeply. Because for the people who are suffering, who are lost, which is at some point all of us, right? We're faced with something that's really, really difficult, right? When we face uncertainty, we are primarily wired to be batshit scared of it, right? And so we need someone else out there in certain, assuming that you're at the threshold of your ability to tolerate the fear, the uncertainty. We need someone out there to be able to say, "Hey, I can't do this for you, but it's happened and it's possible and I've done it and I'll be here for you no matter what." Like without that, like it's infinitely, the darkness becomes infinitely less scary. Right? That particular concept is tremendous for me, right? Because in spiritual practice, in meditative practice, when your goal is awakening, enlightenment, or whatnot, like you are seeking, in some sense, to, language is so tricky, seeking to attain the realization that the uncertainty is exactly why life is beautiful. It is perfect. It is not in opposition to our well-being. It is our well-being, right? So it's like we are seeking to reprogram that fundamental fear, that we have a biological fear of uncertainty, and ultimately, at least in the Buddhist tradition, is the ultimate liberation, the ultimate well-being comes when we come to recognize that that primal fear is unfounded.
Do you think, like, correct me if you don't think this is appropriate, like that uncertainty gives our lives the potential to obviously be good? Because like without it, like what I'm coming back to in my head is like when people are like, oh, if everything was just good all the time, right? Like nothing would actually be good. That would just be baseline, whatever.
Yeah,
But it's the
it would
fact
be
that, yeah, it's the fact that things aren't fixed in that way, that there's the potential for those different aspects. There's the uncertainty that gives the potential for life to be what you just described.
Well, it sounds like it sounds like uncertainty to you in that moment represents infinite possibility.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. The possibility
Right.
that you have, both sides of that coin, good or
Right.
and bad, but there is both. You have options.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Like, and when we think about uncertainty that way, we recognize that it's unavoidable and it's necessary. Right. And if you just flip a perspective, right? Like, I was actually, when I was in Wild with Ariana, we were standing on the beach in the middle of the night and I was looking out into the ocean. It was hazy and it was dark. And I was looking, just vast blackness. Someone out there in the world is looking out there and seeing their demon and needs to run back on shore. And someone is looking out into that same blackness and saying, I want to know what's out there.
Yep. I know exactly what you're talking about because
Yeah.
I've walked in the night, like, and I'm not a huge fan of the dark, but like I've also had in the other where I've been in a really good place. Probably, I think it was actually coming out of again like another like dark night, like, and I just remember like like I'm totally okay. I'm totally fine. I'm okay with being here. Not okay in the sense that it's like that lukewarm. I am in acceptance that I'm just walking in the dark.
Yeah. Right. Like in that moment, the darkness is okay.
Yeah, it wasn't
Right.
scary in the same way.
And I guess the point that I was making about that is that like that uncertainty, how we react to it, is purely a product of habitual way of seeing. It's a habit. It's just one of the many possible interpretations of uncertainty. And maybe instead of trying to force ourselves to go into the uncertainty while we're terrified of it, coming to recognize, and that's one potent way of being able to shift your experience. I'm not saying don't do that, but there's also another way of coming to ask ourselves, well, can we see the emptiness of uncertainty? That uncertainty is not one way, which means that it is not bad. It does not always mean our death. It can mean our death, but it also means possibility, adventure, exploration, safety. It means you're safe enough within your own self that you can now risk it all to explore. Right? It's so much of our well-being comes down to perspective, right? And I don't like saying that because it's been really kind of bastardized in common in colloquial self-development, but like life is very much how life appears to us is directly dependent upon the way that we see it. Like Ian McGilchrist, psychiatrist, in one of his books says the world that appears to us is created by the way that we attend to it, in some sense, paraphrasing that. Like how we look at the world creates the world we're looking at.
And I think that's why it's so important, right? Like, as you say that with the whole perspective thing, like, I think there's the other layers behind that where people need to understand, like, where they inherited their patterns and like their conditioning. Because it's like, again, it's like easy to be like, I'm just going to become optimistic, but like, it doesn't really work like that. You know what I mean?
No.
Like, so I agree with you. Like when you say perspective, like I hear like the deeper layers of like, what is it going to take for me to change my perspective? And why do I have my current perspective?
Like a constructive, a good optimism, a non-toxic optimism is born from a perspective on life that sees all possibilities, right? Toxic positivity is born of a deep primal fear of the unpleasant, trying to force itself to look away and continuously redirect towards positivity.
I just feel like, as you say that, like, I think a lot of people would resonate with, like, the feeling of someone who is toxically positive, right? And like, there's something about it that like irks you at it, like in your skin, where you're just like, it's not real. Like, there's something underneath that, like you're saying, that you're just like,
just screams denial.
Yeah, you're just like
denying something.
You're like, you're not actually, you don't feel that. You're saying the words, but the feeling isn't actually in line with those things. And
there's like an anxiety to it. There's like, this needs to be true. There's almost a pathological certainty about it. Like you need to see it this way. You need to do it this way.
I don't know if I've never considered it from the anxiety standpoint. I just know like that it just does not in alignment with the words for sure. So I get,
yeah.
But, yeah, dude, there's so much.
Yeah, I was like, I was just having this funny thought before. I was like, wow, this podcast has successfully become the perfect expression of the ADHD mind, driven by love and compassion, right?
I mean, this is exactly what I wanted it to be, though. Like, is not where there's that barrier where it's like, hey, if you aren't super into anime, like that's why I chose to also go with it where it's like anime inspired, because like we just need that as like a common thread, but that doesn't have to be the whole thing. And then we end up with conversations like this.
Well, the common thread, right, is on a superficial level is anime.
Yeah.
But like, we've had this conversation before. Like the reason, like one of the probably the deeper reasons why you're so drawn to anime is because it connects you with your own humanity.
Oh yeah,
I mean, it helps you, like you see yourself in these. Like it's an activity of self-knowledge. You're witnessing and experiencing directly what it's like to be human, right? And we can, for you, that happens to be through anime, and for me, it happens to be through things like meditation and just regular contemplation. Right? But that's like the most beautiful thing. That's the most important thing. Like, that's what draws all of our crazy topics all together, is that it's all about how do we become happy? How do we really come to know what it means to be deeply and truly happy?
I also just think of like, for me with anime, like it's something that just drives me more towards exploration of like my life in general, right? Where it's like, it just gives me these ideas where I'm like, oh, I wonder what that word means, or I wonder what the basis for this symbolism was that goes outside of it, right? Because like I think that's something I admire. I was thinking about this way before the podcast too. Like there's so much depth in choice of like in word choice, like name choice of different things. Like like I never knew this, and maybe you did. Like Logan had recommended me this one anime that I actually mentioned to you the other day, which is
Yeah.
Gundam Iron Blooded Orphans. But like at one point, the one mech suit vehicle is called like there's a Rex on the end of its name. So like I love dinosaurs growing up, but I never really understood what like Rex in Latin is king. So Tyrannosaurus
Oh
Rex
yeah.
makes a lot more sense. And then I think in that root too might be tyrant. Like so it's like that next suit's character. Then as I learned that, I was like, that makes a lot of sense. And the one before that is a Latin word for like the leader of a pack of wolves. And I'm like, okay, like that's not like the Bachelorette for me, like which I haven't seen, right? But like there's so much more there, and through that, like it makes me want to explore all these other things, as well as deepens my appreciation for like different aspects of my emotional experience.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of where I became so fascinated in the nuance of language. But yeah, like I had that same experience, not necessarily with anime, but come to learn the nuances of the really fine and important nuances of life, right? The extraordinariness of the ordinary, right? That something so simple as the way we communicate has embedded in it so much beauty, complexity, and it's very, very nuanced.
No, and it's you who gave me that.
Well, right. I was about to say, I was like, why do you think why do you think I harp on language so much? Right. The way you speak, embedded in the way you speak is the way you see and the way you are. So if we're not careful about the way we speak, we run the risk of literally through our own words perpetuating our own suffering, our own pain, or maintaining our own delusion.
And yeah, and my appreciation for language comes from our relationship. Like I've changed the way I talk significantly, both to myself and to like other people, right? But I think like with what you're saying, like words have weight to them, and there's obviously connotations around that. Like being ignorant isn't actually a bad thing, but that word is not a positive. There's not positive association for most people with that word. Like
Right,
versus
right.
say like, oh, okay, this is just a topic that you haven't learned about yet. I could very well say this is a topic you're ignorant to, and those are received in two very different ways, right? Like,
Yeah, totally. Like you can use the word ignorant without its negative connotation, but at the same time, because it's not really defined by it. Maybe it is actually. Well, see, this is why we have to do this. This is why we have to look. I don't even remember what the textbook definition of ignorance is.
I think it's just not knowing of something. I thought because I think I looked it up at one point, and we were having a conversation on like is it colloquialism of that word, like the meaning in society of it. I might have,
Yeah, like it's lacking knowledge, but it's
yeah.
also discourteous and rude.
Okay, so it has a negative connotation to it.
So
Period.
it does have a little bit of a negative connotation to it. But case in point being that ignorant being a representation of a word meaning lacking knowledge, right? Or being uneducated, right? To say someone is uneducated, you cannot say that without insulting them, right? Without having to really carefully say, I am just trying to describe his education status, but I am not equating that to his self-worth or his value or role within society. Right? I am not talking about him as a person. I am just talking about the the basis of his intellect. Right? Like without being able to make that delineation, it's very hard to use the word ignorant or very hard to use the word uneducated without implying that. And that just goes to show that language is not simply textbook definitions. There are other social influences and cultural influences that attach to it alternate and additional meanings that can make or break a message.
For
Right? Because
sure.
if I mean to say that person is uneducated, and I'm not careful with my words, though I don't intend to, my own ignorance can perpetuate unnecessary suffering, not because they're wrong or because they can't see language in that particular way, but because language is also that. Well, language is like a bomb, dude. You're packing your entire universe into a word and you're throwing it at someone.
Well, it's also subjective, right? Like when I hear that, I think of like there's the tonality in which it's delivered, like the statement itself. Mm-hmm. And then like you don't know who you're talking to and how they might project. Like you might say like this person's just uneducated, and it's not a dig at their self-worth or who they are. But mm-hmm. someone else might project onto that like, oh, he thinks less of that person. When in reality, someone's just pointing out like they don't know about that topic simply because they don't know about it.
Right.
And I think that's also like a felt thing too. Like you could tell, well, assuming you're not projecting, like you could tell if someone's like just saying something to give you, I'll say constructive feedback versus if someone's actually trying to like bring you down, I'll say for lack of a better word.
Yeah, you can tell and sometimes you can't tell.
Yeah,
but
which
you want to be able to tell. You want to be able to tell. Yeah.
And I think that's where the awareness, we just keep coming back to like the awareness of like, can you ask the question of like, what's my relationship to that word? Like I know when someone says like, it is what it is, and my relationship to that is changing. Like my initial relationship to that is like a fuck you, because it's like, okay, like, no, you're just, it's like passive aggressive from the way I know it developmentally. Mm-hmm. And now it's more of like, it is what it is in the sense of this is all it can be. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? Like, but that's a perspective shift.
What's really good, like even within that, like you just highlighted the capacity for language to tell us about ourselves, how we respond to words, how we respond to these empty but very influential phenomena can tell us about where we are, right? So like, we just have a tendency to believe our reaction, but language can be an understanding of the nuance in language can now add to our tool belt, a tool for continued and refined self-awareness, right? Because if you say, hey, Elish, you fucked that up, right? And I did fuck it up. And I respond with, hey, fuck you, you're a fuck up, right? And I step back like, whoa, okay, what does that say about my present conditions? What's going on for me? Oh man, I worked really hard on that, or maybe I am just been conditioned through my childhood to be very averse to criticism. Maybe getting things wrong means something really terrible for me. Maybe I'm hungry. Maybe my knee hurts.
Yeah, there's
right.
100%.
Like language can be a mirror that reflects us back based upon our reaction. Because now what you just stated there is like previously you would respond this way, but now when you say that, you respond this way.
Yeah.
Like now that illuminates to us something about how you are in this moment, your position relative to the world, right? You take how or in more spiritual terminology or Buddhist terminology, or maybe even psychology, but the density of your sense of self, right? When your sense of self is looser and more boundless and less rigid, you're more likely to see things as they are and respond to things in a way that is less and less personal, less and less skewed in any particular direction.
For sure. And I think that's where like the language thing comes into play so much, at least when I think of like clients, right? Like the way in which we phrase feedback to them, or like the cueing of maybe something's not being executed the best it could, or there are pieces missing, right? Like the way we phrase that is going to affect like how receptive they are. And at the same time, like, you don't want to obviously, like, I know this is a very common thing in people who practice certain modalities, right? Like you're not trying to make someone fragile, but at the same time, if maybe the execution isn't there, we need to be able to bring awareness to the fact of like, they're not performing this thing right. And that's why the desired outcome might not be happening, or it might not be the right exercise for them. Like, but there's a lot of factors that need to be
the fragility in that aspect has nothing to do with the moment of criticism. Right, it is the fragility is a product of one's response to the criticism, right? So correcting someone, this doesn't make them fragile unless it is a point of fragility for them.
Yeah.
Right. So like we need to be able to understand those nuances. Right? That's like in fitness, right? Oh man, we're all over the place, and exactly in the same place too, right? Like in fitness, we have the people that are like biomechanics is really important. And I had other people was like, load management is more important, right? For maybe you shouldn't focus so much on whether or not they're doing everything right, because it might take away from their goals, and just constrain them well enough so that nothing bad happens, or the bad things happen the least, and they can still move towards their most superficial goals.
Yeah.
Right. And then, but it's like, it's both of them, right? It's both and, right? It's both of them, and how we understand that and how we communicate that is what makes or breaks, what makes or breaks that situation.
Yeah, for sure. I think of it just as always being on like a spectrum, like how much of each piece has to be there is going to be dependent on the individual, dependent on like the goal, like it's all context, right? And I think that's actually like, I say this because it is funny to me, but it's also, I think, the reality. Like Jordan Peterson, and also like the way we both talk at times is like the easiest way to piss someone off at times is when they want a definitive yes or no, and you answer it depends, right? Because there are all those other things of like, I don't know. I'm not going to demonize split squats, which is the first exercise that came to mind, but like pushing your knees over your toes is bad. Like that requires far more context, right? Like, there's a lot of other things, but
not
like,
inherently.
yes,
right?
exactly,
Not inherently.
exactly.
It's necessary. We have to be able to do it at the right time.
Yeah. But like if someone was to then be like, okay, well, maybe if this person has knee issues, they maybe will sit more back in a squat, right? But like again, there's context where I think a lot of times like that's lacking in some situations, like you're saying, like there's not like the thinking of all the different variables. It's just like, no, that thing's fucking terrible. And it's like, well, what about the other 5 pieces of the puzzle? It's like, no, we don't talk about those.
That doesn't serve my narrative.
So. Yeah. Like, what are you trying to have a discussion? Like,
yeah. Oh my goodness. Yeah. Language. So important. Language for me is a really fascinating thing. Right. And I think language has been a really important way for me to come to understand the world, right? I pay so much attention to how I speak and the nuance of my words. Like, in every Instagram that I post, that I put, and every piece of content that I put out, everything that I say, like in my head, it's like 10,000 different things being calculated. Right? Am I accounting for the right context, tonality? Is it making sense in terms of the cultural way? Is it making sense in terms of our relative relationship? Would that make sense to that person? Right? Oh, and what I wanted to say before is like something that came to me was like helping people simply by making them more aware of the way that they speak, and showing them how the way that they speak represents the way that they speak illuminates the way they're relating to themselves. Like, I talk to a lot of people about meditation, right, and things like that. And sometimes they come to me for meditation instruction, and sometimes the best instruction is to point them to how their language demonstrates that perhaps there's a misunderstanding that's preventing them from being able to attain whatever it is they want to attain. Like, do you notice that you notice the words that you're choosing? Right? Like sometimes, one thing that I'm particularly sensitive to is when people find themselves in situations that they have no choice in, and they interpret it as if that they have to have a choice. Example being, so confusing. But example being like, no, when someone says like they snapped at someone because they were really angry, and I did that. I snapped at them. I'm like, technically on the surface, it's true in the sense that I relate to you and you did the snapping. But within that, baked in that, is likely the belief that you have more agency in that situation than you did. What you forgot to recognize is that you were at a threshold. The situation was such that you didn't have a choice but to snap, because that snap was the only way you could survive that situation in some sense.
Yeah.
So if we switch to say, instead of saying like, I chose to do that, or I snapped, or it's like, or even qualifying it by saying, I didn't have a choice but to snap. This demonstrates some kind of understanding that it wasn't a choice, and it couldn't have been a choice. That is so powerful for people. And that's all through language, all through understanding the nuances of language and how our beliefs and assumptions get baked into it.
For sure. And I just think of also like you're obviously talking about like the patterns that are underlying that with not having a choice. It's like reflexive, right? To some degree. So I think like you can say I if you want to say like you spoke that, but I definitely agree where it's like if you can at least recognize there's those underlying things that made that happen, you don't have to beat yourself up over it. You can be like, I don't want to respond like that if I can prevent it and change my patterns. But you also have to recognize, like, I've definitely said shit where I'm just like, I realize I said it after I've said it. Like it happened. And it wasn't even like, I was like, oh, okay. Like maybe that's not, I wouldn't have done that again, but it was reflexive. Like it wasn't, I didn't think about it.
Right.
There was no like, this is the next thing I'm going to say to Elish. Like, it was just like, this was what came out of my mouth. And I heard myself saying it as it was happening.
Yeah. Right. And that's, at least to me, that's super key to being able to, well, maybe what's key is being able to have the experience in which you recognize that nuance, or having the experience that allows you to recognize that nuance. Like when you can say, I did this, and really literally just mean that it was this character that engaged in that behavior, and not necessarily take ownership over a situation in which you didn't really have the agency you think you did.
For sure. And I think with that, like the understanding that we're all going to make mistakes, obviously, and like screw up or mess up. Like, and that's part of it, right? Like we can't control everything, like you're saying. Like it as much as we like to, like it's never gonna happen.
We're inevitably going to hit a threshold at some point, a threshold beyond which we are able to maintain some sense of agency. And we have to go another step further from that and recognize that what happened at that threshold, it's not some big vacuous nothing. When we reach that threshold at which we can no longer have agency, we are overwhelmed by something. We have an unconscious mind that has already our responses based upon the past ready to protect us. So in this situation, I guess now I'm saying this to resonate with people who feel bad about themselves for snapping, right? For doing things that they've recognized on some level they didn't have a choice over, but it happened anyway. Right? Like we have to be able to understand, man, how did I get here? We have to be able to understand that once we get to that threshold, right, something has to happen. We have to have some system kicks in. Our unconscious and most primal systems kick in to protect us. And anything done beyond that point is a necessary regulatory behavior, right? And then we have to have compassion for that. We can't blame ourselves for that. We can't take responsibility. We can take responsibility for it, but we can't assume that we could have behaved differently in the moment that we couldn't.
And that makes sense to me, because what I think of is like the whole, like, what are your thoughts like when you're really distressed versus when you're not distressed, right? Like, and it would be seeing how those conditions give rise to those types of thoughts, and like how easy it is to identify with them or not identify with them based on different situations. But I also think about like the mood elevation stuff of like, you know, you had a terrible day at work and then you come home and snap at your partner. Like you're already starting out like with the I don't know, the gas pedal halfway down, right? Or like 3/4 of the way there. And then they tell you you're having asparagus instead of broccoli and it's over. Like, you know what I mean? Like you're already hyper reactive to your point. Like you're already primed. You're already primed to do those things or react in a very specific way.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh yeah, I'm going to push down the brake as much as I am the gas, and I'm just going to spin here. Like it's probably not going to happen. Like you're going to just push the accelerator harder. Yeah.
The problem in that situation wasn't that, you know, you blamed your partner for something that's not their fault. The problem was that you were ignorant to the truth of the situation. Right. So you don't feel bad about the thing. I mean, you don't beat yourself up for the thing that happened. It had already happened. And it happened because of causes and conditions that are unavoidable. But we recognize the root is not the behavior. Because even if you got to that point where you needed to make a decision whether to snap or not snap, that energy that was already having the momentum has to come out some way. So if you don't snap at your partner, you snap at yourself. If you don't snap at yourself, you snap at the table, right? You break the table, or you snap at the, with anything else, right? So when we look back on that situation, like for a lot of people, it's important to recognize that you don't beat yourself up about the thing that you did. You learn from it as best you can, but you come to recognize that the reason why that happened at all was because there was an ignorance to the conditions that led to it.
Yep. And
right? You weren't clear on the fact that you were emotionally already primed by your day to then respond that way. That the solution is not to have not prevented that thing from happening, but to regulate yourself better and pay more attention to your needs as it was building up.
I think about that, and then like obviously, in the case of someone's partner, you can always apologize, acknowledging that you didn't realize you were primed in that way. And then it also comes down to like, maybe if you couldn't calm down, right? Like you can at least communicate if you're in that place coming home in this example, right? Like, hey, I had a really bad day at work. I'm like really on edge right now. And at least, again, it's not going to fix everything, but at least there's communication for things, why things might happen, and it might hurt someone else less, or they might be there for you. There's a lot of different things there.
Well, it prevents the situation from being misconstrued or even happening at all in the way that it would have. Right? That's something that I try to practice with Ariana all the time. Right? I have the condition and personality where when I get really upset, right, I can really get aggressive with language. Right? I can start to really I can push and not really know how far I'm pushing and end up pushing people too far. Right? That's one of the things that I've been raised with that I'm trying to correct. So ways of me dealing with that is being able to say, hey, babe, I'm feeling like shit today. I'm feeling very irritable. I'll tell her that I'm feeling really irritable. If I start responding in a certain way and I don't really have the capacity to just like not behave that way and not feel that way, and she calls me out on it or she recognizes it, one, we make it okay to call each other out. Right? And two, when she calls me out on it, I'll say, I'm feeling really irritable. And then she knows, okay, not to take it personally.
For sure.
Right. Like that's really important. That's really important.
I'm trying to think. I feel like, we ended up, we've gone so many places with this.
Yeah, I'm telling you, like we followed a thread, but we have ventured in many random directions. All I can think of right now is like, oh man, my ADHD is perfectly on display right now.
I feel like this is
very active mind. Let's just say a very active and enthusiastic mind.
I feel like this is just the interconnectedness of all things, though, right? Like because you could take any of these and bridge it back to the other parts where it's like, it's like, hey, this isn't like, I think that's one of the most interesting things, at least in my opinion at times too, is like how interconnected everything is. And it's just like, can you find the common threads between them more so? Like, it's not that they aren't, like, it's just the fact that like, maybe you don't see it yet, or I don't see it yet in a situation. Because I think,
totally. Yeah.
I mean, I think that's what honestly makes exploring so much fun. But something I was thinking about earlier, just to transition, was like, I think one of the things I love is like, even if I don't care, like I'm not invested in the things someone else shares with me, like feeling the authenticity and like excitement and enthusiasm in another person sharing something they're passionate about is like so enlightening, I guess, or like lightens you up so much that like you don't need to care about that thing. You can just sense how much it means to them. And like obviously I have my own version of that too, so I can resonate with that feeling.
Yeah.
It's definitely like, I don't care about like golf balls, and like someone's telling me about like, this is the best golf ball, and it's like you can just feel that through them. And for that reason, I don't hate golf balls. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because it's not about golf balls.
Yeah, exactly.
What you're dialed into is the person.
Yes.
And their experience, their deeper experience. It's not about golf balls.
Yes, but like, yeah, exactly. It's that passion and that like rawness.
Yeah. For me, the experience is where I can really, I am at my best when I am capable of instinctively sharing in other people's enjoyment. I know I'm feeling good when I can be excited for someone being excited.
I feel that.
Yeah,
I really feel that, because that can be really challenging for me too at times.
yeah, like that's how I know when I'm at my best, because I'm not always that way, right? Like for me, one of the things I struggle with is sharing excitement with those who are closest to me. Simply because growing up, my family was very limited in that expression, right? It was like, oh, dad, I got 100. It's like, great, you're supposed to. Not like that. My dad was much more approving. He was just like, good, you're supposed to. But at the same time, it's like, if you do wonderful things in the culture that I grew up in and the family that I grew up in, there is a lot of dissociation. There's a lot of disconnect. There's a lot of trauma and fear. So there's the inability to share in someone else's expression because that was never modeled to them. And the conditions were never present. So for me, that's remembering that, knowing that really clearly, and being able to recognize the moments where, oh, I'm excited, not because they've achieved something, but because they're excited. Right? It's like, oh, okay, who am I? What am I feeling? What are my conditions in that moment? And how do I resonate more with that?
In the moment that you're able to be excited with them, right? You're saying you're
Yeah,
sharing it.
like,
Okay.
how can I not just have that experience, but reflect back upon that experience as a pointer towards my most authentic and best self? Because in that moment, there is no you. In that moment, you have disappeared. There's just that person. Right? Like the Buddha said, like in the seeing, just the seen, in the hearing, just the heard. Right? In the words of Shinzen Young, right? When he was like, he said to his teachers, like, Shinzen, I'm I think he's like, I'm sick of these wimpy Americans, right? And maybe it was a different story, but ultimately, he tells Shinzen, when you encounter the activity of the oak tree, restrict your experience just to the activity of the oak tree, which in that sense means when you are experiencing the tree, let there be only the tree and not a separate self being constructed, interpreting, and having judgments and opinions on the tree.
So right? Not like thinking about the tree, like philosophizing about the tree, just
right, just being there one to one. Like, if the only way you can do that is you let go of the self. It's a selfless experience. And in the context of maybe Western psychology, we can say that selfless experience also represents a sense of self that is so safe and so secure and so well connected that it is not threatened by someone else's joy, someone else's excitement or well-being.
Yeah, and that rings true for me overall too, even in what you're saying, where it's like, I want to share. It's like, oh, don't send that message. Like, hey, I'm excited. Like, yeah, because it's hard, right? Like, I think what I wanted in the same way that you're kind of sharing, right, is like we want other people to be able to share that excitement with, to like be in that with other people. And like when you don't get it, when it's not received, I guess the way we'd like it to be received, or even maybe to some magnitude in what's in line with what we think would be, you know what I mean? Like someone tells you about like their greatest joy in life, and you're just like, okay, like it's like a backhand, right? Like in some way.
Yeah, totally. It's like it's a mismatch. It's like, oh, you're not here with me, and that's painful.
Yeah, and like it's that ability just to be able to, it's being able to share that with other people and have that shared joy that like does also change, like we're right back to connection again.
Yeah, right. Like imagine, like, okay, in all your greatest moments, let's say in meditation, right? We've been meditating together for a long time. When you've had meditative experiences, like I remember that experience you had laying on the couch, right, when you're back in Jersey.
Yeah,
and exactly. This was right in the middle of you having a really tough time. Like you were having a tough time in life, and you had these experiences. You just laid your head back, and you just relaxed, and you just melted, and you had some kind of a selfless oneness experience, right? What did you do right after that?
Texted you, yeah.
Right? Now imagine the alternate situation where you have no one to tell. Yeah, it's like, wow, there's an impulse. I want to share this.
Yeah.
Like I say this to Ariana all the time. Like when she's going through tough times or what, or even when she's not going through tough times. Like I love her so dearly, right? Like when I have wonderful experiences, I can't tell you how many times I've sat here and I'm like, I've sat with marijuana and hape and I'm having this blissful experience of openness, of self-love. Like I see every part of myself and I love every part of myself. And within that is just this beauty, this joy. The first thing that comes to mind was, I want to give this to Ariana. I want to give this to Trevor. I want to give this to Chantel, my sister. I want to give this to everyone. I want to give this to everybody.
And I feel like for me, 100% the same way when I have those conditions, like there's nothing I want but to connect with other people. Like I'm going to reach
Yeah.
out to these people I don't even really talk to a ton, or even be of service differently. Like be more likely to go out of my way for people because I have enough. Like
Yeah.
that would be the way I just, not obviously in the same, a different situation than what you're saying, but for sure, I want to share that and be able to bask in that with other people. And it's not just like, oh, it's just me. Like, because that's
Yeah.
isolating, right? That sucks.
Yeah. Like I think it illuminates to us the primacy of community,
And
right? That not only is being happy within oneself really important, but being happy within oneself is also sharing oneself with the world. They are one and one together. I think a lot of people tend to see that as problematic, like the desire to share everything with everybody. I think there's enough social baggage for people to reasonably believe that that means there's something wrong with you. You can't have it for yourself. But it's not true, right? When we are in our best state, it is natural impulse to want to share, right? And I noticed this actually a lot. So, for a long time, I've set myself a budget for giving money to the homeless. Every week I'll say, okay, I have $20, right? And I'm going to give away $20 worth of stuff. I'm going to set aside $20 to give away. A lot of times, my desire to give money, well, every time actually, the ease with which I can hand someone money, or even want to approach someone, or even interpret that as being okay, is highly dependent upon my emotional state. If I'm not feeling good, I'm less likely to give money, right? And if I'm not feeling good and I force myself to give money, it opens me up a little bit, right? So like that, I think that shows something that's really potent. That when we have enough, we want to share. When we have enough and we hold on to it, we actually suffer.
right? Yeah, because you're just containing everything, right? Like you're locking all this energy in a container that wants to be expressed and connected with other people, and instead you're suffering because you're not open, you're not sharing yourself.
Yeah. Right. Like like that could be the situation where you have enough of your needs met, but what's missing is the connection that allows you to share that with the world.
And I think to your point, right? Like we can be happy with we can self-validate and appreciate whatever, be excited with ourselves, like experience like, this is excitement. Like, but there needs to be a world to share that with. Like if there's no world for you to exist in, like that, again, you're just isolated, right? Like, so if it's just
Yeah.
you in your experience and there's no world, like that's not much of it's really not an experience in general, because there is a world which you exist in. You're just not stepping into it.
I think theoretically you can actually survive in isolation, but the connection thing has to be there, right? Like for us normies, right? Like we have to be able to connect with the world around us. And there's probably a situation where there's some kind of vagabond or some kind of nomad that can survive and be tremendously happy on their own out in the world away from others. But one, and let's assume they have their most fundamental survival needs met, the thing that they also have is a connection to the world. They have a deep enough connection to the world around them without the other people in it that it sustains them. Right. And I think that's what those wandering yogis, I think, can do if they've glimpsed God or if they've attained enlightenment. Right. And maybe this is not true. Maybe this is ignoring something about human nature. But let's just assume that that connection is fulfilled, the connection to self and world. That when you experience something, the world also experiences it. There is no separation, no gap. Then you're more likely to be okay. Right. But in society, right? That connected, even as, so the case in point is that connection is primary. Connection is so important. If we don't feel connected to the greater world around us, whether it's through people or through the universe in and of itself, whether it's through nature, whether it's through spirits, without that connection, we've got problems. Right? So connection is primary. So when we have wealth, we want to share it. Right? That's why I do so much pro bono work, right? Like, it's a lot of times, like, I'll even, it doesn't, I was working with someone the other day, and we ended up on a call for like 2 hours, right? And she made a point to show her gratitude, because I offered to her, because she was in a difficult situation and I care about her. She's come to my circles before, and she's like, wow, like, I can't believe you spent that much time with me, and I could tell there's like maybe like, oh, because it was free. And I was like, oh, I wasn't even thinking about it like that. Right? Like, I know you, I care about you, you're suffering, and I might be able to help. So that's the easiest thing in the world, is just help.
Yeah.
Not put yourself behind a paywall. Like, in certain circumstances, it's necessary.
Yeah.
Right. But when it comes to being able to help people, we don't want to have to put a paywall between us and helping them.
I also think that highlights, like, if you're in that kind of place, like, at least for myself too, the same thing. Like, if someone's like, hey, I'm dealing with this issue doing my reset or whatever. Like, if I'm in a really good place and I really want to connect, like, I'll gladly get on FaceTime with you for an hour and a half, and we can go on whatever tangents in addition to helping you with your reset, versus me just sending you a text. Like,
it's not transactional.
Feel left, heal more. Like, I'm not thinking about it as like, oh, I don't want to do this. I'm like, okay, you know what? I actually really want to connect. I could help this person. Like, I'm not worried about
there's not even the moment where you have to say, oh, I do really want to connect. It's just like, oh man, there's a person in need, and I might be of service. And that's just unconscious. It's an unconscious desire to help people. Right. I think if that can come out, if you can come to live in such a way and position yourself in such a way where helping others is more important than what you get from it. Right. It provides insight into give without expectation. Right. Because if you give without expectation, it might also mean that you are of the condition where your needs are met. Right. And like, that's something that's so important. Your needs are met. And so it is natural for you to give away.
Yeah.
To give in whatever capacity you can.
Yeah.
To give without expectation is not about, if you give without expectation, you get this. No, if you are in a state, right? It defeats the whole fucking purpose. Yeah, right. If you are in a place where you can give without expectation, it also means that you are of a very high level of well-being. That you are not needing for more. You're not needing for anything. You have everything you need, and so it means nothing. Well, it means everything and nothing to simply give away without having to worry about what's coming back.
Yeah. And I've ran into that in my own thinking too at times, where it's like, I've recognized, like, I could do this gesture and I don't need anything back, because I have enough. Like you're saying, like, I'm fine. Like, and not even that, I'm fine in like a lukewarm way again. Like, I'm actually really good and happy. And like, to do this doesn't, there's nothing getting in the way of me doing this.
Yeah, like, I think this is a really beautiful place to wrap things up, because I want to offer something here, right? Like, let's just take a moment for everyone who's listened this far. 1, I want to know you. 2, let's just take a moment to reflect on how good we have it right now. Right? To be able to say right now, we are in alignment with what means the most to us. That we're not needing for anything material. Right? That you're doing something that you love. Right now with this podcast, I'm doing what I love in my life. We have the capacity to be able to talk about these things. Like, we've been talking about conceptually how beautiful that is. Maybe we need to take a moment to recognize that we have that now. within this relationship that we have as friends, right? That we have within our own lives. We're talking about this big mythical thing, right? But we have it right here. And so many people out there have it and don't realize it. Right? If we just let go of our expectations and our judgments and ask ourselves really honestly, how good do we have it? Our well-being might be a matter of just recognizing that our glasses have been on our face the entire time we've been looking for them. It's so simple. Like, I'm so grateful right now. Like, I'm overjoyed to be alive right now, to how this call is going, the connection that we have, that we can just fucking riff off of whatever is strange stuff happens in our head, and likely going to help somebody. Someone out there is going to watch this and be like, wow, that was really cool, right? And someone might look at this and be like, that is not cool, I want to move away from this. And in some sense, great, move away from this and towards what you want. But like, in this moment, you can say, at least I can say for myself, I've got everything that I need. And I've still got things that we might say are problems. I still have things like, past conditioning that I'm working through that creates unnecessary suffering. I still have suffering. I still have pain. Right? I still have struggles. I still have things that I feel like I need to know in order to move forward and that I don't. I still have confusion. I still have those things. But you know what? I also have the deep knowing that in this moment, I have everything that I need to accomplish all of those things. And most importantly, the knowing that I'll need those things to know who I am. Right. And I would love for you to share your version of that.
I would say, oh, what you
go ahead. Go ahead.
I'm just really deeply grateful we can have these kind of conversations and to be here doing this, right? Like, I just had the thought, like, this is life. And like, if anyone's watching this, like, this is life. Like, and that's beautiful. Like, to be able to see all the different parts and the depths of what things are. And I think for me, that is what honestly makes my life so amazing in the ways that it's developed at this point. For me, is like, there's depth. Like, things aren't just superficial anymore. And I think that's what makes things even more beautiful, is like, I'm not just seeing the surface level of my experience at this point.
Yeah.
And like, I can there's some level of awareness, right? Like, which again, like, it makes it a lot easier to move through the world. It makes it a lot easier to appreciate things, like to understand the sentiments behind things.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it is definitely incredible to see how different my life has been since like since our relationship, since I've had the opportunity to do a lot of different things and explore myself. Like, it is the only way I want to and will live my life going forward. Like,
I resonate with that really deeply, right? Like, life as it is magnificent. We are just blind to it. At this moment, as it is not lacking anything. And what a privilege and what a joy it is to be able to know that firsthand, and then to be able to not hoard it as if it's something, or grasp at it, cling to it, but to share it. Like, what's more important than that? Right? Like, isn't that the essence of this entire podcast? You're doing exactly that with anime. Right? That is a perfect expression of that very deep contact with real life.
I would agree with that. I mean, what I've said to actually a lot of people off this podcast is like, I find that anime is the initial common thread that just brings the walls down, and from there it's like so much more of an open conversation. In random people I've met or like barely know, like, we'll be talking about strength training. It's be like, you ever see anime? And it's just like, from there, it's like people just come alive. Like, when you hit that one thing that someone's passionate about, and you're just like
me and mushrooms.
Yeah, I mean, dude, no, I feel that too. I had a client this morning tell me, he's like, yeah, I'm about to take like probably like 1.5 and go on a picnic. And I was just like, oh, dude, wait, you've done mushrooms? Like, it's like, sweet, we get to go
That's
here.
fun.
Oh yeah. And then we actually got into like the lemon tech thing, and he's like, I did this thing with these lemons. I was like, oh shit. I know exactly what you're describing. Like I like the lemon, but no, dude, for sure. I think
I like its effect. I don't like the taste. Oh, it's traumatizing for
I don't
me.
know if I even remember the taste because only once, but
It's lemon, lemon and dirt. That's what it tastes like.
dirt. It is so beautiful to be able to share all these different things with people, and I guess the common humanity, right? Like that's what I appreciate. I think so much from the work and like the vulnerability to circle back is like we're all the same, right? Like, and that's so unifying and so in such opposition to isolation that I've felt and that we feel at times as people, that like
Yeah,
it shifts, it does really shift your whole worldview.
totally.
So
Straight to the kokoro.
that's it. It was appropriately named. There's actually the
Yeah.
but when I heard that, I was like, that's pretty much it. Like right in the feels, but I'm like, there's a higher level.
It's perfect. It really is perfect. And I think and I think the names for each of our, because I'm going to be coming out with a podcast too, and I'm just calling it Simply Extraordinary.
Okay.
Right? Like straight to the kokoro and Simply Extraordinary. Like it's
Like
so perfect.
is that going to like the ordinary is simply extraordinary?
The simple is everything. The simple truth is that this moment and everything in it is nothing short of extraordinary. Right? That's the thing that if I were to pick something that I hope to be able to teach to everyone that I encounter, it's that. Just simply being yourself, simply breathing, the simple thought, a simple physical sensation, the simple awareness of awareness
I mean,
is it is not lacking anything.
I think that's like, at least for me, where I am, like that's the goal too, is being able to see that like sacred ordinary, like you're saying, or the sacredness of this moment, because ordinary could have that connotation in which someone misinterprets it. Like
Yeah.
and the fact that we exist, right? Like I've gone down thinking about some of that, like the chance that enough people reproduce, right? That like I happen to be this me.
Yeah, right. The simple act of you being here is
Yeah.
a product of an extraordinarily complex web of causes and conditions.
And I think like being able to even have to tap into the gratitude of what that feels like is like, not something I could fully rein in, like sit in at this point, but like I think that's part of the goal, at least in my mind, in my life, like being able to know that, like you said, things don't have to be any different than they are, like in this exact moment to moment.
Oh, that's awakening, right? That's enlightenment. As you just come to recognize that it's just this.
So I feel like if you want to wrap it up here, like if people want to find you, want to connect with you, what is the best way for them to reach out?
Instagram at intuitive strength, one word. Yeah, that's it. DM me, comment on my stuff, whatever it is. That's where you'll find me.
Well, thank you, dude. I am incredibly grateful that you were on here, and I did not expect this to go in as many awesome directions as it did. But this is exactly what I want this podcast to be about. So
Likewise, except I think I did expect this. It just wasn't expecting how it happened.
Fair enough. But yeah, deep
Thank you
love
for having me.
for you and our relationship, and hopefully I'll have you on maybe again in the future.
Whatever you want. Likewise, man.
Thank you.
You're welcome.